In this episode, Dr. Andrew Huberman talks about cold exposure. He talks about how cold exposure can improve our mental health, physical health, performance, recovery, and even mental performance. As always, I highly suggest if you have the time, listen to the entire episode on Spotify or iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you don't have time, well, that's why you're here, so let's get to it. Huberman stresses multiple times in this episode that everyone's cold tolerance is different, and everyone's core metabolism is also different. So you're going to have to do some testing on your own. Jumping into a cold lake, while it might be okay for some people, would put others into cold shock and die. With cold exposure, the most potent stimulus isn't always the one that you experience as the most intense in the moment. Now, Huberman will recommend that the cold immersion up to the neck with extremities submerged is actually the best method, followed by a cold shower as second best. One of the first things you need to understand is that everyone's body temperature works in a cycle throughout the day. Your body is actually coldest 2 hours before you wake up. It peaks in the afternoon, and then it begins to decrease before you go to sleep. And this makes sense as it follows a circadian cycle. When timing your cold exposure, you will most likely need more willpower in the middle of the day as opposed to the beginning of the day. One really cool trick that he recommends throughout this podcast is when you get overheated, he recommends cooling specific parts of your body. Now, he recommends cooling the upper half of your face and actually the palms of your hands and the bottom of your feet. These glandular parts of your body can cool your body down even quicker. It's like a quick highway to your thermostat. So let's say you have ice in your water bottle. Put a couple ice cubes in your hands, put a couple ice cubes under the arches of your feet, and you'll cool down so much faster than any other method. And no joke, this works. Last night I was in the sauna and I was nearing the end of the session and I was kind of thinking to myself, maybe I have 5 more minutes left in the sauna. I grabbed a couple ice cubes out of my water bottle, put them under the arches of my feet. I put a couple in the palms of my hand, and I cooled down so fast and so effectively that I felt like I could sit in there for another 20 minutes. Now, Huberman also says that you can use the same trick when you're doing an intense bout of exercise. Let's say you're doing an extreme CrossFit workout or something with a ton of muscular endurance and your body feels like it's about to collapse. What's actually happening in that moment is your body is overheating. And so if you use that same trick with cooling down the palms of your hand and the bottom of your feet, also the top part of your face, you'll actually be able to do more volume during that workout than without doing any of those techniques. The key that he stresses throughout the episode is you just want to be uncomfortable. That's the most important part about this cold exposure stuff. The best tip he has on withstanding these cold exposures is be as mentally still as possible. And with your breathing, take 2 quick inhales followed by an exhale. 2 quick inhales through the nose, 1 exhale through the mouth. If you want to crank up the intensity of how cold the water feels to you, move your body around. Huberman's recommended cold exposure protocol is 11 minutes per week, submerged to the neck, at an uncomfortable temperature to you. Huberman himself does 2 to 6 minutes per session, which averages out to 11 to 15 minutes of cold exposure per week. He mentions a study in which cold exposure around 57 degrees, subjects experienced around a 350% increase in metabolism. Norepinephrine in the blood increased by 530%, a 250% increase in dopamine. And the length of this increase in dopamine was around 2 hours. Cold exposure converts white fat cells to brown and beige fat cells. So what does this mean to you? It increases your metabolism. Now, he also outlined a super stack: intermittent fasting, caffeine intake an hour or 2 before the cold exposure, and then the cold exposure itself to maximize dopamine and core metabolism. You will also have the greatest effect on your metabolism if you allow yourself to naturally reheat your body after cold exposure. So after your cold exposure, don't just turn on a hot shower to warm up. The idea is to let your body naturally warm up. Now you have fat brown cells and beige fat cells in your body. White fat cells are not metabolically active. Basically, you want more brown and beige fat cells and you want less white fat cells. Cold exposure after training does reduce soreness and helps you recover faster. And this is almost as effective as hitting the like and subscribe button. And one important tip to remember: don't do cold exposure late in the day, because the cold exposure is going to raise your body temperature, and this is going to make it more difficult to sleep later in the day. And that's it. See you in the next one.